This blackberry crisp recipe is going to be absolutely fantastic. If you've never had a crisp before, it's a fruit dessert with a crispy topping. If you like pie and you like cobbler and you like texture, you should definitely give a crisp a try. Fruit crisps are one of my favorite things of 2020, and I've done other crisps before. Not sure which videos will go up before this one, but in my opinion, I think since the crispy topping itself has a lot of sugar, a fruit crisp works best with fruit that is tart, like sour cherries, a tart apple, or in this case, blackberries. So we are going to make a blackberry crisp today. Here I have 16 ounces, 2 cups, or 454 grams of frozen blackberries that have thawed, 3/4 of a cup of sugar as I measure 160 grams, 5 tablespoons of cornstarch as I measure 50 grams, also 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. That is for the blackberry filling. For the top, I have 1/2 cup of flour as I measure 75 grams, 1/2 cup of light brown sugar as I measure 120 grams, along with a dash and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 cup of quick cooking oats, 40 grams, 1/2 cup of chopped pecans, 60 grams, along with 1/2 cup of butter, 113 grams, 1 stick, which I put into the freezer. It's going to be in there about 5 minutes. I'll show you why I did that. But like I said, this is the filling. We're going to simply, since the blackberries are already defrosted, going to simply mix together the sugar, the lemon juice, the cornstarch, everything for the filling. I already prepared my 8x8 casserole dish. I just very lightly buttered it. I'm going to get this mixed together, and then I am going to put it off to the side. Now that my blackberry filling is completely mixed, I'm going to pour it into my 8x8 casserole dish. Make sure the berries are evenly distributed. Then I'm going to set this aside as I prepare the topping for my crisp. My blackberries are in my dish. They're off to the side. Now it's time to work on the topping. Here I have 1 stick of cold butter, and I'm going to chop it into smaller pieces. So I am going to use this knife actually. It's a little bit sharper. Make sure your knife is really sharp. And I'm going to cut it like this. You could cut it into tablespoons. That's more than 8 tablespoons. Doesn't really matter. Now we're going to keep cutting it into smaller pieces. So I'm going to take these squares of butter, cut them in half, cut them in half again. So really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make little cubes of butter. I actually decided to go back and cut them into even smaller pieces. These are falling apart now, but here I just cut them like this. Like I said, they do not all have to be the same size because they're going to get even smaller. If you have a pastry cutter, you could definitely use that. If not, just use a fork with long tongs. I am going to take my topping, the dry ingredients for the topping, my flour, a little bit at a time, my flour, whoops, my brown sugar, my oats, and my pecans. And actually this would probably work out better if you mix them together before trying to mix them with the butter. And you're just going to try to work them together with either your fork or your pastry cutter. Like that. What you're trying to do is you're trying to make little pieces of butter that are coated with the topping mixture. It took a bit, maybe 10 minutes, but it's done. It could be a little bit finer, but honestly, the butter is kind of warm, kind of soft now because it is warm in this kitchen. But honestly, I think it'll be okay. Now I'm simply just going to crumble this over the top of the blackberries. My blackberry crisp is now ready for the oven, and I did want to point out just one thing. You can see it's a bit uneven, and you might be tempted to press it down like that. Do not do that. As you can see, let me back it away so you can see, there are two separate layers. You can see the blackberry layer and the crumble layer. Even though the blackberries are liquid, this crumble topping, it's still staying on top. It's floating. It's sinking down a little bit, but for the most part, it is staying on top. That's what you want. You want this to have two layers. If you press down, it is more likely that you will push the topping into the berries, and it's going to be wet. When it cooks, it's not going to be crispy. So like I said, just sprinkle everything on top and resist the temptation to press it down. My blackberry crisp just came out of the oven. It was in at 350, uncovered, for a full hour, 60 minutes. After letting this crisp sit for about 30 minutes, I couldn't wait to dig in. Although I did like this blackberry crisp recipe overall, I did want to share my thoughts on it. Don't get me wrong, the crisp was definitely good. The crumble topping was excellent because of the oats and the pecans. And the filling was both sweet and tart, as you would expect from a dessert made with blackberries. However, when compared to the sour cherry crisp that I did earlier this year, as well as to the blueberry crisp that I did earlier this year, that video is coming soon, I thought this was somewhat mediocre. Don't get me wrong, I still ate it. It was definitely good, and maybe mediocre isn't quite the right word. I guess my feelings about this blackberry crisp recipe are similar to my feelings about the raspberry pie that I did a few months back. It was good, but not as good as I was expecting, and not as good as my other recipes. And once again, to be completely honest, I'm not quite sure why. I've done videos on blackberry pie, blackberry dumplings, and blackberry cobbler here on my channel, and I loved all of them. So I was expecting that I would really like this blackberry cobbler as well. Like I said, just like with the raspberry pie, I'm not 100% certain why I didn't like it, but I think that I didn't like it because it was a lot seedier than I was expecting. And once again, I'm surprised that I didn't like the seediness in this crisp because blackberry pie, blackberry dumplings, and blackberry cobbler are all seedy, and I didn't mind the seeds in those. Here, I think the difference was that the seediness kind of competed against the crispiness of the topping. Because in the sour cherry and blueberry crisp video recipes, the only thing that was crispy or crunchy was the topping, not the filling. In addition to taking away from the filling, I felt like the seediness of the blackberries also kind of ruined the experience of the fruit filling of this crisp. The filling is supposed to be really soft, which this wasn't. So, like I said, I think the seediness is what made me not like it because it ruined my texture expectations that I developed from the other two crisps that I made. Is this bad? No, it is not bad. This blackberry crisp recipe is good. However, is it the best choice of fruit for a crisp? Probably not. As you will learn when you watch my blueberry crisp recipe video, I have very specific requirements for the fruit that I use in a crisp. So stay tuned for that. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.